how many years I've known you, John. Hasn't it been close to 20? But I'm not sure. But over that time, I have come to know John as a champion of Earth. He might not acknowledge this as his greatest accomplishment, but he is the greatest maker of compost. He's also been an organic farmer. And he's able not only to do it, but to teach it. He has studied widely. He has also had a project of raising chickens that would be free roaming, right? Yeah, I don't know how that project, I haven't heard what is going on with that project. Not so much, huh?
Not now.
No, but he started it. John also has had some spiritual experiences. Not that those had no spiritual connection, but I'm talking about non-physical experiences. He's had some dreams, and he's followed his intuition, and he's spoken about that to us in the past. So today, he's going to tell us some things that may relate not only to his physical life, but also to his non-physical existence. John.
Well, hello. First, I want to say that I left a reading. I left about 20 copies out on a table that I particularly like from Louise Morris. And I brought this because I always like to start a talk the way she started a reading. Greetings, beloveds. I also have a question for Lloyd. So for because he's, smart. If cars going the speed of light, do you see the headlights? Okay. And also, you got to remember, the early bird gets the worm. But don't forget, it's the second mouse that gets the cheese. I'm sorry. I had to do it. Yeah, I can hear the speakers. So, 7 months ago, life can change on a dime. The reading about community was very good because I really needed a community. I'm talking a little slower now. Some of my words are unclear because 7 months ago I had a stroke. And, I went from work to the hospital. I didn't, know I was going to be in the hospital that day, but I sure was. I just thought I was tired. Why am I so tired today, and why am I bumping into this wall? But it happened, and I drove myself to work. An alert co-worker said, "John, something's wrong. You need to go to the hospital." So he called my wife, and we went right to the hospital. I mean, crazy, but I did drive myself from work, having a stroke. I can now move my arm, I can raise my leg, but it was hard at first. First we went to the doctor's office and they said, go to the ER, and right away a group of nurses and doctors gathered around me like bees around a pretty garden, like ticks. And I was thinking, is this real? What's happening? It was very strange. But I got checked into a room, and it started getting worse. they call it the evolution of a stroke. So I'm saying some of this so everyone can be aware. You know, you can have many different symptoms, but they call that worsening the evolution of a stroke. And I was having that. But then, for a few days, I felt as if a dark curtain was drawn, and my awareness, my spiritual life, kind of went dark. I couldn't feel much. I couldn't sense anything. My intuition was gone. It was not quite as bad as what I've read about A Dark Night of the Soul, but it was bad. I'm starting to get it back, but slowly. I was, left with depression and thoughts of, did I have my will done? So it was a, pretty big deal. I thought, sure, I was a goner. But I was aware that next to me in the hospital was somebody that was worse off than me. I mean, they were truly close to death. So that made me feel a little better. But, I had to get over my depression. And it's important to have some resources when you start to feel bad. That's part of what I wanted to say. And then I couldn't tell the difference between the side effects of all the pills I had to take all of a sudden and the stroke. And that was unusual also. But then a beautiful and smart osteopath named Dr. Quilter came to my room, asked me if I wanted to go into the hospital's rehab unit. And I was like, I don't know. I didn't know anything. I was just like, laying there. But they only have 8 beds there, and she thought I was a good candidate for their rehab. That's when I realized, and this is another important lesson in any part of life, I had to surrender everything. I could do nothing for myself. My respect for nurses, any nurses here? No? My respect for nurses went way up. I was completely vulnerable. They had to bathe me, feed me, clothe me. My humility had to be complete, and probably a good thing. Yeah, I had to learn to surrender completely. And it may be that we all have to surrender completely eventually. I know that Eckhart Tolle has a place in one of his books that one of our jobs as we get older is to surrender. Learn to surrender. So, but my thankfulness also grew because the people were taking care of me. Every day, I thanked the nurses, the therapists, doctors, cafeteria workers. I just kept saying thank you. In fact, when I talked to Jim Norris, who had had some severe brain trauma, I asked him, what's your advice? How do you get through it? He said, what are you grateful for because this happened? And that was the opposite of what I was feeling. So, but I said thank you many times every day. I still try to. Because of an experience with my grandfather who had strokes, I thought a stroke was a death sentence. Now, as I said, I thought I was, in the hospital to die all of a sudden. But my understanding had to change. So now I know, because of what we know about strokes, and my understanding did change. Now I know you can get better after a stroke, or I wouldn't be here talking. Slowly. But you must act quickly and actively, and it requires your attitude also. You must have a positive attitude, no matter what, whether it's a stroke or any condition. You have to have an attitude that, I can do this. Things are going to get better. I'm still working on it. I'm getting there. But one thing that's a little more mundane than the spiritual things we talk about here is the role of family and friends. Like having a network of friends just like you all. And neighbors like Judy. I especially want to thank my wife. Ooh, sorry. It was very important. Even when I came home from you can tell I'm still in the process of grieving. So what I had was a great outpouring of love toward me. And I realized that's something you have to develop. Before you have the stroke, before you have something happen, you have to develop the community of friends. You have to be a nice person to other people, help other people, and it all comes back to you. So be especially nice this week, everybody. My wife thinks I've even been kinder after the stroke than I was before. I mean, come on, it's not possible, but.
Dogs and the people.
Yeah. I go on long walks every day in my neighborhood, and I've come to believe that there's a lot of kind people in the world. People see me just having the cane, walking, and they stop and talk. The kindness of people is a very important piece of life. Maybe more important than the work we do or the prayers we pray, just be kind. So, because your identity will change. My identity as Farmer John felt like it ended. It didn't, but it felt like it was done. And I had to have another identity, and one identity that I'm advocating now is be nice. Just be nice. There may be nothing more important, nothing more spiritual. I'm not sure about that, but it all goes together. I also believe in the healing power of nature, because I live near trails in an 80 acres of woods. And my long walks are very, very helpful in healing. Green is the color of the heart. Everything is green out there. No bugs yet. They're not out. I even stuck a snowplow on my cane. No, I'm kidding. I did go out when it snowed. And, I, of course, had to walk real slow, but I went out early before anybody was out. It was very pristine and beautiful. And I laid down one time next to a tree so I could pull myself up with one hand and tried to make a snow angel. When I looked, I was like, well, there was something there. Because I could only move one side. But that was so pretty. And Kathleen would clothe me before I went out. And she said I looked like a little kid all bundled up, going out in the snow. And the first time I said, I need to, even though everything has gone dark, I need to start praying. I can't meditate easily right now because, attention, but I decided, I said I could pray. I can do that. So the first time I went out in the woods and went to a place where I was looking out on Salt Marsh Point and prayed my prayer, and immediately, as soon as I got up, I saw a hawk sitting in a tree making little peeping sounds instead of the usual loud screeching. And we stared at each other for a long time. And he just kept staring and going beep, beep, beep. You don't think of a hawk making that sound. But I've also gotten to know the dogs of Salt Marsh Point. And I know there's also by Eckhart Tolle, because I have a book that Bruce got for me. I don't know how he says it, but there's something in a pet, a dog or cat, that you don't get any other way. It's just pure, I think he would have called it, he used the word essence a lot. And they always let me stop and pet their dogs. So that's great pleasure of mine. And I would like to relay a couple of especially spiritual incidents that happened. Once, it happens, my wife and I were having an argument, and I was like, oh, I gotta get out of here. I gotta walk again, So I decided to put all my weight, which I can do now, but put all my weight on my gimpy leg. And I stood in front of a couch thinking, I'm going to get out of this house and walk. So I stood in front of a couch in case I fell. But what happened was I fell that way. My first attempt at, walking was to get a big bruise on my butt. Another lesson learned. But of course, later I had to sing our song, which goes, you were right and I was wrong. And I've been sitting here all night long, and I'll never again question your judgment. So I fell down, got a big bruise on my butt, but the worst part was next, because I had a visiting nurse, and I had to report that I'd fallen, I had to show her my bruise. So there I am, having to drop my drawers in front of the nurse from a foot away and say, "Here it is, I'm mooning you." And she had to poke my butt and see if anything was broken, but it was okay. Just a big bruise. Another time early on, I took a walk, and it was again in winter, and I realized I hadn't put on my belt. And I had the cane in my good hand. My left hand couldn't pull out my breeches. So I had to walk halfway home with no breeches, my breeches down to my knees. Another act of humbling. Oh, well. It kind of went with going to the hospital. But I've learned especially humility, humbleness, surrender. These are important things. I'd been working on them, but I had more to go. And this has been a good teacher for me. So to do what Jim North said and think of what you're grateful for, I can say, one, I got closer to my family and my daughters and my wife, who helped me. I got grateful for the lessons. I got grateful for many, many things, but I had to look for them, believe me. Mostly, though, the walks were good, and so I get a lot of nature time. Another kind of funny thing is that I guess I need a lot of protein to regrow the brain and nerve endings and everything that's happening. And they say now, I've learned that the brain takes more energy than even somebody who works out all the time. It's the brain. So I've craved, protein. I'm eating meat, sausages, good pasture-raised hamburgers, bacon, hot dogs, chicken, fish, protein, protein, protein. But during this time, we were watching a show called Ghosts. And there was one ghost in the show named Thor. He was an old Viking ghost. He'd been hanging around a long time. So now when I eat meat a lot, my wife says, "You're Thor, aren't you?" Because sometimes I have to eat with my non-dominant hand. And sometimes I can't cut something, so I pick. Thor is here. Well, I do have some Scandinavian DNA, so maybe it's a past life. But I am getting better these days. I go to the Y 3 mornings a week, and I have it's a transition program from the therapy center. And, I had to find it, but they have somebody that works with me there who really helps me a lot. So the spiritual seeds were planted earlier. Learning humility. It's like, why is there a quote in the Bible about how you sow your seeds? Some seeds fall in the path and so forth, some in fertile ground. I kept planting seeds, literally and figuratively. Also, I was reminded of the quote, which I can't say it clearly, but of all the nurses, but in the Bible, it says, when I was hungry, when I was thirsty. So I'm now retired, but I am working on another composting project with some young people. I do make good compost professionally. And the articles I've been writing, my editor comes over and just listens to me talk. We come up with an article, and that's been fun. By the way, I have a new book coming out on my collected columns. That'll be fun. But the last thing I want to say is, in my darkest hour, which is dark, it was like I said, a curtain was drawn. I was in the hospital, and I did see a light, a little light in the corner, just a little one. I saw what I thought was a person named Jesus standing in the light. But because it was so dark for me, I could only see a little light and a little figure. But I knew I was being watched over. And that made all the difference for me. And just remember that you're always being watched over.